Okay. Yeah, I think we can begin. Almost 100 attendees. Welcome, everyone. Can we get recording? Yes. Of course, we will send you the recording. But yeah, welcome to mobile crash reporting and debugging best practices. First, let us introduce the workshop team. Hi, everyone. My name is Lazo Nikolov. I'm a developer relations here at Sentry, and I'll be your MC. We got Zoe.
Hey everyone, I'm Zoe. I'm product manager here at Sentry for all things performance.
Nice. Hello, Zoe. And we got Neil.
Hello, y'all. My name is Neil. I lead solutions engineering, and I'll be running the demo portion today.
Awesome. So I hope everyone enjoys. Yeah, we're ready to begin. And before we dive in, I already saw someone asked for the recording. Yeah, we'll send you the recording after the workshop. For the Q&A section, please use the Q&A section here in Zoom, not the chat, because yeah, chat can easily get buried with other messages. So yeah, we're gonna use the Zoom Q&A section. And at the end of this workshop, we're gonna do a quick survey. So if you have a minute or two, please stick around, do the survey. It'll mean a lot to us. All right, so for today's agenda, we're gonna start off talking about the mobile monitoring maturity curve. Then we're going to move on to how Sentry does mobile monitoring, preceded by Neil's pretty cool demo we're gonna see. Then Zoe is gonna step in and tell us about tips and best practices on debugging and monitoring mobile apps. And then at the end, we're going to close shop with the Q&A section. All right, so we can begin. The mobile monitoring maturity curve. So this is something that I bet every engineer goes through naturally, whether they're like seniors or juniors. Whenever you're just starting out with monitoring, you're gonna follow this maturity curve. So for example, at the beginning, you want to ensure stability. You want to make sure that your app is stable, right? You're putting out fires, you're fixing bugs and crashes, and your goal is to reduce your crash rate as much as possible. And your challenges in this phase are finding the root causes of your issues and also managing device fragmentation and app store requirements. So when you conquer that, when you grow out this phase, you get into the streamlining workflows phase, where you're focused on prioritizing and proactively solving your issues. So you already know how to get those issues. Now you're focused on how to prioritize those issues. What do you want to work on? And of course, building systems for faster debugging so you can, make the feedback loop a lot shorter. And in this phase, your main challenges are understanding the impact of issues on your customers, and of course, identifying owners of an issue. So if you're working in a team, that can get complicated. If you're working by yourself, good for you. And of course, you're growing out this phase, and then at the end, you're in the optimizing performance phase. So you have, you know how to fix bugs. You have a whole system on debugging. You have a whole system on reporting the crashes, etc. Now you're focusing on how to deliver the best customer experience possible. So you're focusing on improving the overall app quality, right? How to make your app faster, how to make your app snappier, etc. And your main challenges in this phase, during this phase, are identifying and solving the root causes of performance issues in this case, not just like general crash issues. Okay, so I'd like to make a quick poll where you are on the curve. Of course, no judgment here, but just to see, just to gauge the audience. Are you in the third phase, second, first, or even if you're not sure? Okay, we're still voting. All right, ensuring stability. 41% of you are in the first phase, 21 and 24% are in the streamlining workflows and optimizing performance, and 14% are not sure. Great, this is good. Okay. So let's talk about how Sentry does monitoring. And what you get. A lot of you already know what Sentry does, but for those of you who don't know, errors are at the root of, like, issues are at the core of Sentry. So we got error monitoring, and that means telling you, Sentry will tell you whenever an issue happens in your app, along with all sorts of information like hardware, software, etc. Then you got performance monitoring, and this includes ANRs, freeze frames, etc. Then there is release health. So performance issues and error issues are tied to releases. And we all know that when we push an update on App Store or Google Play, not everyone will update immediately, right? It's not like people are spending time updating their apps. So when errors happen, we tie them to a release. And through the release health feature, you get to see how your releases introduce new bugs or solve the old ones. You get to see like crash-free upgrades, etc. Then we got Discover, which is just another way for you to create custom dashboards and slice and dice the data that you already get from Sentry. So yeah, to make more sense of the data for you or for others in your team. And then we got the Rich Ecosystem, which is tools and integrations built that work with Sentry. For example, we got the GitHub integration and GitLab for source control. So when an issue happens, you can just click on a button and it'll take you to the file and to the exact file, to the exact line. Then we got Jira and other project monitoring integrations who are very useful for example, when a bug happens and a crash or a performance issue, you automatically get a task in Jira, etc. So yeah, for more information about all of the integrations, you can visit sentry.io/integrations. And yeah, and we'll also talk about them. But yeah, basically, Sentry helps you resolve the crashes faster. It helps you investigate crashes by the device type, by the operating system, as I mentioned previously, and releases with actionable real-time insights. It also helps you boost your team's productivity by streamlining the workflows with custom alerts, issue assignments. One more thing that the GitHub and GitLab integration gives you is the code owners. Automatically pull the code owners. So for example, if an issue happens in my part of the app, the issue will automatically be assigned to me. And of course, build better experiences. Sentry helps you go beyond crashes and solve performance issues before they impact the customer experience. So for example, here's what Relief had to say. Relief is a mobile app that lets you track and share your biking, hiking, and running activities. They got like 15 million happy users, and they keep them happy by ensuring that their app is stable and it delivers the best user experience. And Sentry plays a huge role in that. These are some other companies that are utilizing Sentry's errors and performance products to deliver value. And you probably recognize most of them. For example, you got Cisco Meraki, we got Disney, Atlassian, Riot Games, DoorDash, etc. Well, yeah, enough talking. Let's actually see all of this in action. So, Neil, I invite you to share your screen.
Alrighty, let's get started. All right, what I am about to show is how Sentry can help mobile developers see in real time and solve in record time. And we do support all the major frameworks. So I'm going to be demoing mostly in Android today, but I'm going to step out and also do iOS and a little bit of React Native as well. But getting started is simple. It's a matter of just getting our SDK inside of the application, and we make it as easy as possible. So if you can go ahead and head over to our docs, which you'll be prompted to after you create a project as well within Sentry. And all you have to do is run our wizard. So here in this case, I have an Android app. We run this wizard and it'll automatically inject our SDK and build steps such that we're capturing errors, exceptions, and performance and shooting that up to Sentry, as well as have artifacts uploaded as well. So in this case, since it's Android, we have our ProGuard mappings. Let's go over and switch to iOS. It's more or less going to be the same install instructions. Here we have a wizard that's going to do the same and also upload those debug symbols. And I'm going to show one more before I get into showcasing my app that has Sentry built into it. But in React Native, once again, a wizard that will achieve all of the previous items that I mentioned, in addition to uploading the source maps as this is JavaScript as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Here I have my Android application that has Sentry already integrated into it. And we have a few issues. One, it's taking a very, very long time to load my application, and I don't know why. This is unacceptable. This is way too long. But eventually, when this does load, we actually have a more critical problem, which is going to be as I try to buy some items, we are going to have an error. And here I can say, oh my God, app crashed, and we are unable to complete the checkout process. So as I mentioned, Sentry is going to help us see in real time and solve in record time. So what we see here is that we've diagnosed some performance issues that we're going to get into, but we have a more critical problem. Here we have a crash that really impacted the user experience, stopped me from getting revenue and selling very expensive plans. And now what we see here is the Sentry issue. This error or crash happened 2,000 times, affecting 2,000 users, has flared up as such, was first seen in X release, still seen in Y release. We can hook onto any issue trackers as well as we need to, and we're going to be given a breakdown of all the tags so we can understand what devices this is happening on, what Android versions, as well as is it happening in production, or are there other certain things turned on where we can isolate this problem to a certain subset of users. So here, as I mentioned, with this error happened 2,000 times, we can iterate through each one of these events, see exactly what is going on. We're going to have the attributes, specifically the tags here. We'll provide a screenshot as well in the moment of time that this error happened. And most notably to the developer, we're going to show the stack trace. So we can see what function it happened on, what line number, and the lines of code, 5 lines before and after. The exception, we can hop into any of these frames and see what was going on. And we've desymbolicated this as well. So we will get you to the original actionable stack trace that will let you know what's going on into your source code. And from here, we can jump into GitHub and see that code. And we will overlay this if you are using something like CodeCov with code coverage, showing you that this is tested code or untested code, as we all know that untested code is more prone to problems, as well as when we actually do fix this, let's go ahead and write a unit test and cover this code such that it doesn't regress again. South of the stack trace, we have breadcrumbs, and this is what happened prior to hitting the error. You'll also see your logcat or your logger chime in here as well. But what we want to present is what happened prior to hitting the error, whether these are gestures, network requests, and such. And you can also custom append onto breadcrumbs tags and really anything that you see in here. And underneath that, we have our AI buddy here, which we can go ahead and run, and it'll tell us how to fix or how to better handle the error. And underneath that, we'll have all of the other information that a mobile developer could possibly want when it comes to figuring out the who, what, when, where, and why. So here we see information regarding the app, the device, the battery, memory, screen, architecture, operating system, as well as the dependencies. And what's really useful is view hierarchy as well to mobile developers, so we can understand the layout of the application and get an understanding of what was going on when it came to the layout and rendering. And then we can custom attach as well, any attachments, and go ahead and view those. Let's go ahead to the top and take a deeper look at the stack trace. It looks like we got some error and we threw some type of main fragment backend API exception. And if we go ahead and look at the breadcrumbs as well, it looks like we had a HTTP request that went out and returned a 500. And here we can go ahead and trace the issue right to the root cause. So let me go ahead and do that. So I'm going to hop from front end to back end, all within one click. And now I jumped from the Android side to the backend side, and I can see exactly why this error happened. And this will happen in the errors are linked or due to one another. So this is how we can trace errors through services as well. Right here is actually my favorite feature when it comes to Sentry's error monitoring platform. What we can see is that we have denoted as this commit that Simon authored as the one that likely caused this error. So therefore, he is the best firefighter for this job. So here, implicitly, we derived that this error was introduced by Simon, and Simon can actually fix this within 5 minutes. So let's get it assigned. And we also support code owners as well, if that's something that you are using. So we can explicitly define ownership based on who owns that code, depending on path, file, etc. So a big part of Sentry, as I mentioned, is not just seeing the issues in real time, but being able to solve them and getting them into the hands of the firefighter that has the best ability to solve this. So here in this case, Simon. So this is the who, what, when, where, and why when it comes to this error within Android. So let's imagine this got fixed, and now we still have some other issues within our application. Most notably, why was it so slow to load? So let's go ahead and investigate that flow. So I'll start off right over here once again. And Sentry has already told me that there's a file IO on main thread. It's not just telling me that my app is very slow to load. It's actually denoted the performance problem and taken me right to the relevant data set here. So if we go ahead and take a look, we can see that we have a performance issue, which says file IO on main thread. We can see the CPU usage, the memory, and then we can also see the relevant spans in play here as well. So it looks like we have a file right here, and it happened on the main thread, and we can optimize that. So let's go ahead and debug even further. Let's view the full event here. So what we are looking at is the transaction. We can see that it took quite a long time to load up the initial display. We see some other vitals as well. Once again, our CPU and memory, and then we see all of this span. So here is what we were looking at earlier. Looks like there was a file IO on main thread. We should probably move this into a background thread, use a dispatcher, and we can optimize that. But if we go ahead and look a little bit deeper, looks like there are other slowdowns here as well. So firstly, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. Looks like it took a long time to load up our products. And we can uncollapse this and see this directly within this Android transaction. And we can see what happened within our backend as well. So it looks like there's some querying that we could optimize here within the backend. There's some dysfunction over here that we could optimize on the backend. But let's go ahead and stay in Android land. Looks like there was quite a bit of time spent on processing the product here, 3 whole seconds. This is some area that I would want to optimize on. So this is as far as distributed tracing would take you. Here we've identified a slow span, but guess what? Sentry also has profiling for mobile. So right from within here, we can click view profile. That takes us right to the profile here, which shows us exactly what happened on the call stack and what functions were invoked and the timings associated with it. So here what we see is the span that we're looking at. I'm going to go ahead and just drag and drop here and I can see the profiles, once again, memory and CPU overlaid on top of this. And it looks like eventually we called process products, and then that called get iterator. Scrolling down, we got some recursion, and guess what? It's gone out of control here. And then right from within here, we can jump into the code to make the change or to debug further. But at the end of the day, as I mentioned, Sentry not only wants to help you see in real time, it wants to help you solve in real time, and developers do not want to dig. Here you can see I jumped in from performance issue to transaction to slow span to profile. And as a developer, I got my answer of where the slowdowns are happening and where the errors are happening. So Sentry wouldn't be Sentry if it made you do too much digging. So here in this case, I'm just going to take a step back and go to transaction summary here. And Sentry has already denoted the spans that are of interest, the tags that are causing slowdowns, as well as the functions that are causing slowdowns as well. So we want to help you get to the root cause as fast as possible through guided workflows here. The next piece that I want to show is a new guided workflow that we launched for mobile. So here now, I'm going to select my Android project, and I can see compare against 2 releases, and it looks like there was an increase in time to initial display. And this is something you can instrument in your application. And now just clicking in, I can get a release breakdown by device class, by initial display, full display, and I'm presented the spans of interest here. So we can see that something that used to take 0.08 milliseconds now takes a full second. That's something I want to dig down in, and just clicking in will take me to the appropriate sample set. So now I can debug further and see exactly what was going on and get to fixing this. One piece that I forgot to show, as I mentioned, I wanted to jump into some iOS and React Native as well. So here is what an error looks like in iOS. So we were looking at an Android error previously. Here's an iOS error. We've gone all the way down to the Swift code. It's desymbolicated. And same with React Native. We will get you to the JavaScript layer, and here we can see that we've source mapped it, we've desymbolicated and gone all the way down to the TSX, the .jsx, .js, etc. Alrighty. One more quick piece, which is I want to show how Sentry helps monitor releases, and this is very relevant in mobile. As we put out releases, users have to update, and we might have to maintain various releases out there or get telemetry on various versions of our application that are out in the wild. So here in this case, we can basically see that we had one version, another one was put out. We can see that from here as well. And let's go ahead and dig into this specific release. We're going to see the overall crash-free session rate. We can go ahead into other session metrics as well. We can see what new issues were introduced, and we can see what transactions are failing. But this is very, very pivotal for mobile developers, as they need to understand how a specific release is doing, how it's comparing to previous releases, and how it's performing. And this integrates the entire data set from a release facet here. Lastly, we do have the ability to query all of this at will. That is called Discover, as Lazar mentioned earlier. And we have the ability to establish any of these alerts based on these data sets, and we can create complex and useful visualizations very, very easily within Sentry. So here you see crash-free session metrics, errors, performance metrics, and measurements, all coming together within one dashboard, and we can easily go ahead and drill down on this as such. Alrighty, that is what I wanted to show when it came to taking Sentry for a test drive when it comes to mobile monitoring. Thanks, y'all. Handing it back over.
Awesome, thank you, Neil. We always say like our goal at Sentry is for the users to be in and out in 5 minutes on their way to solve their bugs. But you pretty much demonstrated the 5 minutes mark there. Thanks for that. Okay, so now we are going to go take some time to review some takeaways from the demo. and some recommendations for your mobile team as you're setting up or evolving your use of Sentry. And I'd like to ask Zoe to take the wheel.
Thanks, Lazar. Sorry, that came out weird. Thanks, Lazar. Also, thanks, Neil, for the demo. Most of the recommendations we have here are actually taken from the demo, as well as just how we would recommend that you use Sentry in general as you kind of when you go from stage to stage in the maturity curve. So I wanted to take some time to review these takeaways from the demo and offer some recommendations for you and your mobile team as you're either setting up or evolving your use of Sentry. So, oh, that went backwards. Perfect. Okay. So I want to highlight the maturity curve again because this maturity curve is actually additive. So where each stage is actually building on the last stage. This is to drive home how Sentry scales with you and your organization as your team and mobile monitoring needs grow. So starting on the left here, let me just okay, perfect. Starting on the left, you're ensuring stability. So you could perhaps be an early stage startup. Maybe you have less than 10 people on your team. Some percentage of you have identified as being in this stage. So Sentry can actually help a lot here. So with Sentry, we have 3 kind of tips to ensure stability when it comes to the early stage startup. First is uploading the artifacts or source maps or setting up Sentry in such a way that you get like the enriched experience of issue details and making sure that you have all the necessary context, as well as Neil had pointed out earlier, setting up GitHub and GitLab in such a way that you can actually get suspect commits, or for us to automate kind of help you troubleshoot these issues. So to start with the first point, uploading your artifacts. What we mean here is when it comes to Android and iOS or even React Native, you want to make sure that you're properly uploading your debug symbols, your debug files, as well as your source maps. You also want to make sure, and this is actually really important, you want to make sure that you're on the latest version of the SDK. We're very active within our community via GitHub issues, Discord, and other kind of platforms, and we're always fixing bugs on a regular basis. So if you're experiencing an issue on a later or an older version, it's more often than not that it's fixed on the latest one. You'll also get access to like the newest features. For example, on React Native, you have mixed stack traces. So you have, your JS level code as well as your native level code. For Android and iOS, you get performance issues. So things like file IO in the main thread, or maybe JSON or images that are, operating in the main thread when they shouldn't be. And second, second point here is to opt into screenshots or view hierarchies for more context. In general, we want to provide you with as much context as we can in Sentry so that you can actually hone down and find the right issues to tackle, so you're not spending time, as Anil had pointed out, spending time looking elsewhere. So context here, for example, screenshots, you understand and see kind of what your end user is seeing when the crash occurred or when the issue occurred. You can retrace user steps for an issue using things like breadcrumbs. And then finally, you can actually break down an issue using tags that we automatically capture, like device, OS, geocode, user ID, and so much more. And so lastly, integrating GitHub or GitLab for suspect commits. Connecting GitHub or GitLab enables you to go directly into your code base. But in addition to that, we take it one step further, as Neil had demonstrated earlier, and correlate that issue back to a recent commit with the provided for the provided stack trace. So this is, again, just additional context such that you're not, spending too much time doing the guesswork. We're just telling you what's happening. Now, sorry, I'm just learning to use remote for slides, apparently. So these are some of the resources that we have for Sentry error monitoring and using it to its full potential. So troubleshooting source maps, enriching events, and then suspect commits. So now you are at your second phase. The second phase is growth. Your team has grown, your customer base has grown, and you're facing a growing backlog. You need to streamline your workflows, and perhaps you need your perhaps need your processes to be more automated. And so this is where Sentry can actually help a lot, because we have, again, 3 points that I want to highlight with regards to streamlining your workflows. First is alerting and user feedback. So these are the different delivery methods through which you can be alerted on issues. First, not everything is always a hair on fire issues. You cannot equate a crash to a client error. So we have varying degrees of, ways that you can be alerted. From the right, you see low. So these are low but visible issues. We can alert you via email. We have a new user feedback feature within the platform, as well as just the issues feed, just being able to prioritize your issue feed by volume. That's kind of the first category. Then you go into medium. Your medium, which is like your messaging. This is where you can integrate or use workflow applications that you already use in your organization, or perhaps messaging apps that you use in your organization, and receive notifications there. Sentry has a ton of integrations that help you streamline this. And so with messaging apps, you can do Slack, you can do Discord, you can do Microsoft Teams. With workflow tools, we have Jira, we have Asana, we have Bitbucket, we have Trello. So there's just a ton of opportunity to integrate Sentry in a seamless way. And finally, high priority. These are kind of your middle of the night, wake me up if this is happening in my application. And that is, receiving a page or pager duty. So this is where, we tell you, we integrate with these applications in such a way that you are woken up in the middle of the night when these issues occur. Second is custom tags. So as you expand, you can customize issues to fit your team. Instrumenting your own custom tags to capture work streams or or customer base, for example, specific workflows like login or checkout. You can also segment by customer type. Using these tags allows Sentry to alert you on issues that matter most to you, or issue regressions or new issues within a particular workflow. And then finally, ownership rules. So code owners, implementing code owners or the code owners file, you can define automatic issue assignment for smaller teams, or team ownership rules for larger organizations for faster resolution. And these are 3 additional resources. You will get the presentation at the end of this. So these are 3 additional docs or pages for you to refer to learn more about streamlining your workflow. And then finally, in this third stage, you've basically managed your crashes. You've built a fairly automated workflow around addressing those issues, and you can focus on optimizing performance. The mobile code base is a front-end service at the end of the day. So in other words, it's an end user facing service. You want to improve your customer experience because that can ultimately impact your branding, your user retention, and finally your revenue. So we are continuously investing in our mobile performance product. And so I just want to bring up the 3 points and I'll talk a bit about each. So Sentry offers an incredibly robust mobile performing monitoring product that focuses on your mobile application code. But in addition to that, when you instrument both mobile and backend projects, you get a comprehensive view of your application performance from end user down to code level root cause analysis. So to start, as Neil had highlighted earlier, we have a new screen loads module. This focuses on things like time to initial display, time to final display, and how your screen load performance is across your real end users. So we are focusing on 3 areas of performance for mobile. One is screen loads, as we've demonstrated. Second is app start. So these are your cold and warm starts. How much of that is system code? How much of that is application code? And then third is application responsiveness. So these are things like, your slow and frozen frames, your slow interactions. These are things that we are focusing on when it comes to mobile performance. And so as Neil had demonstrated, screen loads is available for iOS and Android in the market today. We are working on that for React Native. And by instrumenting your TTFD, you can actually define when your screen is fully loaded, and we can track screen performance in accordance with your application and your instance. Then we can move into profiling, which is code level troubleshooting. Profiling gets you down to function, gets you down to code level, but it's also an extension of our performance product that's especially helpful because in addition to getting you down to code level, it actually tracks CPU, memory, as well as battery usage across the transactions, the spans, and user usage. And then finally, interactions. So iOS and Androids are actually iOS and Android SDKs are actually the first frameworks to track interactions, and this gets you one step closer to understanding how users are interacting with your application, and it connects it all the way down to potential root causes in your backend. So this is incredibly valuable in just being able to see how your users are engaging with your application and potential causes for things like slow and frozen frames, or potentially things like, higher CPU or memory usage within your application. So again, last resource slide here, wanted to share how you can learn more about these different instrumentations, whether that be time to initial display, time to final display, profiling, as well as user instrumentation. And then lastly, for those of you on the call, we understand that for mobile developers, you are often removed from the user experience of your application. So we are actually working on developing a session replay for mobile. We are currently looking at React Native, Android, and iOS, and this is down the pipeline. If there's nothing else, Lazar, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Zoe. Thanks for explaining the whole monitoring curve. I hope it's much clearer now. Awesome. Yeah, so to get started, it's literally just one line of code. There's a Sentry wizard that'll set up the whole Sentry SDK for your Android, iOS, or React Native app, but we also support Flutter, we support Unity, and many other frameworks. So feel free to snap a screenshot right now if you want to scan the QR code later. Yeah, check out our talks at docs.sentry.io/platforms to see all of the platforms and their docs that we're supporting. And of course, if you want to create an account, sentry.io/signup, and you are there. All right, so I guess we're ready to start into the Q&A section now. We are going to begin by answering the questions that you already asked us in the sign up form. And then we're going to move on here in the live Q&A. Okay, so start with the first one. What are the use cases of this feature for a QA team? And Zoe, I believe you can take this.
Yeah, I can take that on. So this is actually a very broad question, largely because Sentry can be used in so many ways. So I always refer back to the maturity curve. Depending on where you are with your team, with your organization, with your mobile app development, this can actually, help your QA team in finding and addressing issues. Or if you're a performance QA team, this can help you identify those performance issues and then pass it on to the right developer. So this is really a question to center us on the idea of really depends on where you are in the mobile maturity curve, and identifying where you are can really help you kind of analyze Sentry as the best tool for you and how best to use it.
Awesome, thank you. What is the best way to keep track of errors that are not actionable? For example, a network error when prefetching images.
So this is actually a great question, because for our mobile frameworks, we actually do capture client errors, but if you don't want them in the same feed, we are building something called, we don't know what it's called yet, but we are building a module for performance that is focused on network requests. So things like API calls to your internal API, network calls to your third-party services. These are things that we're going to track with that module, and mobile will definitely be part of that. So keep an eye out for that.
Interesting. All right, next question. How can I enhance crash logs? And Neil, I believe this one goes to you.
Yep, enhancing crash logs is very easy. I'm going to go ahead and just showcase some documentation real quick. But basically, we provide you the APIs to do so within the SDK. So here we have the ability to set tags, set additional context, and we can go ahead and enhance our error events by setting these tags, and as they'll be picked up and then sent along, and then we'll be able to view them, query based on them, etc.
Awesome, thank you. Just get the...
I believe the next question is...
Yeah, how can I track down the user steps?
So this happens in two ways. So the first is within issues, within performance, you can actually make use of breadcrumbs. And this is to track the pre and the post of a particular crash or a particular instance that you're looking at. Second, and this is what we're kind of moving in the direction of, is session replay. If you are interested, we are going to share the link of the alpha list for anyone who is interested in being part of the alpha for our mobile replays. And this is where we can track kind of how your user moved through your application and then correlate it to the traces that we already have in Sentry Performance if you have performance enabled. And that way you can correlate an action directly with how your system is reacting to that particular interaction or to a particular event.
Thank you, Zoe. Is there any way to detect memory leaks?
Yep.
Neil, I think this is you. Yeah.
Sounds good. Once again, I'm going to showcase some documentation. So here we go. All right, so for iOS, we do track watchdog terminations as well as we do track certain memory warnings as breadcrumbs, but watchdog terminations is going to be the more relevant feature here, as basically once that's emitted, it'll create a Sentry event and then we can go ahead and kind of do something about it. So that's what we have for memory leaks when it comes to iOS.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. And then I believe the next question is, what is the best way to identify crashes from users that have not signed in? Once again, going to showcase some documentation. Actually, this one I'll answer verbally. So when a user signs in, I would recommend kind of setting a tag or some type of property within the SDK. And then we can query against that as well. So if they're signed in, go ahead and set a tag is signed in true. And then we can go and query Sentry for any errors that have not signed in true or are signed in false, essentially. So basically tell Sentry if the user signed in, which will is a type of enhancement according to the previous question, and then query accordingly based on that.
Awesome, thank you. Is it possible to catch all devices errors that occur when developing with native languages like React Native?
Yeah, great question. So our React Native SDK installs our JavaScript SDK, our Android SDK, and our iOS SDK. So it's going to capture errors and crashes at all of those levels, essentially. So whether it's a native crash that wasn't anything to do with the JavaScript side of things, it'll be caught and taken care of by our native SDKs. And then if it's at the JavaScript layer, it'll be taken care of by the JavaScript SDK and then source mapped and symbolicated accordingly.
Awesome. API for automated reporting, and this is the last one.
Yep. So we do have a bunch of REST APIs that you can use to fetch events, issues, project info, releases, all of that stuff. It's well documented as well. So go ahead and query any of that data to create any visualizations or any workflows that you need. More or less, we just want to make sure you're able to get the rich context that Sentry has in front of the developer, so that we can do something about it, whether it's in some other dashboard or within Sentry itself.
Awesome, thank you, Neil. And though that was the last question that was that we pulled from the sign up form, and now I believe we can get into the live Q&A section. So I'm just going to start top to bottom. And the first question is from Ryan. How does that work if the code owner's usernames are not the same as the Slack /Jira /etc.? And this is for the automatic issue assignments, I believe.
Yep, got it. So how the code owners integration works is you basically map the Sentry user to the GitHub user. So there is more or less kind of that user mapping, and then we're able to do the code owner stuff accordingly. So how it works is when an issue happens, it'll be assigned to a code owner, or we could just manually assign, and then that person is then notified that they are now the ones that need to go ahead and do something about it. So more or less, we map the users, and you do that within the Sentry integration field.
Awesome, thank you. Does Sentry register every issue occurrence or check issue frequency before showing it on the dashboard?
Yeah, so every error will be shown on the dashboard. You can basically query based on frequency, and you can set alerts up based on frequency as well. So something like, hey, this is a new issue that happened today and affected X amount of people or Y amount of users, and that can be done within all the various views as well as within alerting and Sentry.
Awesome, thank you. Now we have one from Vladimir. It's about the out-of-memory events. Most of them, once you open the event detail, you don't know exactly where is the root cause. This is one of the problems, for example, tvOS apps with tvML technology have. Any ideas where we can look at, or do you have any tips where can we find the problem?
Yeah, few tips, and then Zoe, if you have anything to add on, feel free. One, I would take a look at the transactions and the profiles that happened prior to the out of memory issues. That will help us track if we're seeing an increase in memory and track that to a certain span, which will then, if necessary, we can track it to certain functions as well. So that's what I would recommend, is kind of looking at the performance data set to figure out when the changes in memory happened that resulted in that out of memory error. On the SDK side, like, we generally try to surface everything that's reasonable and useful when it comes to errors and crashes. And in some cases, like this out of memory exception, we're not able to get much. So, we do try our best-ish effort, and feel free
Yes.
to file issues and let us know, like, hey, this is not enough, and then we can communicate with you on there and see what else we can gather, if any.
Our out of memory issues are mostly heuristics. I do want to call that out. They are mostly heuristics, and the best bet that you can make in terms of getting out of memory issues or tracking those down is our performance product, specifically our profiling product, because we do track memory usage, CPU usage, as well as battery usage over time within profiling. If I read the question correctly earlier, specifically addressing tvOS, and I just wanted to call out that while we do support tvOS in terms of issues, it is a limited support in terms of performance. Like, I just don't know how much we can actually offer there, because there is we have 2 iOS developers, and the focus of our SDKs is predominantly for that mobile code for the iOS SDK or the Cocoa SDK.
Awesome, thank you. We have a question, and Neil, I believe this one is for you. From Felipe. We answered it, but we want to get back to this one. Is it possible to upload artifacts and opt into screenshots and view hierarchies for .NET MAUI?
Yeah, so we can have screenshots that sent as attachments, and that is basically some instrumentation that we need to do within the SDK, within the app. For view hierarchies, I will have to follow up.
View hierarchies are only available for Android SDKs today.
Awesome, thank you. Here's a fun one. How does the AI buddy work?
Yeah, sounds good. So one, it's opt-in. And if you do opt in, then we take some of the context on the error event and basically ask our OpenAI, how do we fix this? What can be done about it? So that we can get back with basically suggested next steps or fixes. So in some cases, it'll be like, hey, this code was written incorrectly, maybe this is what you should do, or you forgot to handle this case. In some cases, it might say, hey, I don't have details, you can handle this error better by doing this, getting a bit more information. So as I mentioned, like, Sentry doesn't want to just help you see in real time, it wants to help you solve. So we think that using this type of a workflow and getting some help at the time of triage will help get the developer to the next step if they don't know what's obvious just from looking at it.
Okay, thank you. So one of our apps, which is built with React Native, has a very high volume and uses all of our performance units within a day. We don't sample that app currently, so we can look up individual user error reports. we're exploring flipping enable auto performance tracking or enable auto performance tracing. What is the difference and between these two, and which one should we use?
So
Uh,
I can speak to the like the sampling part a little bit. I would suggest you look into sampling only because if you're experiencing high volume, what you want to see is the performance. We are moving towards a performance metrics product. And not only that, a lot of our mobile modules as well as our mobile workflows are moving in such a direction that we give you all the metrics that you need to see so that you're not tracking individual paths or individual user streams. If you wanted and if you were curious about specific user streams, that's where session replay really comes in. So I would highly suggest not to consume your entire quota, but sampling your data can actually help in this case. In terms of performance tracking or tracing, I'm not too familiar on the difference there. Neil, would you happen to know?
I would not happen to know, but we can follow up on that.
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks guys. Profiling performance can be done where the places connecting front end and back end only, or it can be used only in the front end places, like for example offline mobile. It's for profiling.
I'm not confident what offline mobile means exactly, but profiling performance can actually done for the individual mobile application code. So you don't need to connect your front end to your back end in order for you to use profiling. You can solely use it on your Android SDK, your iOS SDK, so your mobile application code.
I believe what you're referring to, Lavanya, is distributed tracing. That's what's connecting the front end with the back end. Thank you,
Yep.
Zoe. Yeah, Neil.
Exactly. So install our SDKs that are framework specific, here in this case for Android, iOS, or whatever mobile side, and then our backend, let's say it's written in Python or Node or Ruby, so one of those SDKs, and then automatically we'll kind of send the trace headers and correlate all this data to understand that errors are linked through services, or hey, these are the transactions that are linked from service to service, whether it's front end to back end or front end to middle tier to back end to microservice or whatever.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. Jordan asks, are you able to correlate a mobile error to a backend error using only error tracking, no performance tracing?
Yes, we can, I believe. Zoe, you want to confirm that?
So we are actually working towards an issues world where you don't actually need performance tracing in order to correlate issues. That is not as of yet available in the product, but we are working towards that direction. Right now, your best bet is having your full distributed tracing connecting your mobile to your backend in performance.
Awesome. Thank you, Zoe. Next one is, what is the criteria for full or final display as opposed to initial display?
So, full or final, there is actually no criteria. You just have to go into, we actually show this to you in our performance product as well as direct you to the docs, where you just have to wrap the action or the function that defines the end of your screen load performance, and we do the rest. So it's a simple, I think, like 5-line instrumentation or 2-line instrumentation, and that's it. In initial display, so time to initial display is something that we already capture automatically.
Awesome, thank you. Can you add custom breadcrumbs?
Yep, absolutely. It's just going to look something like Sentry.add breadcrumb. I believe it'll have a category and then the value, and there's probably some other things that you can attach. But feel free to enrich these events however you want. We want the best possible trail for you. And we realize that there's some stuff that's use case specific that is best left to custom instrumentation that you can go ahead and easily attach.
Awesome, thank you. Any ETAs for screen loads availability for React Native?
We are actively working on that right now, so we are hoping to deliver on this by the end of the quarter. So you should be able to see that. You should see the news on that closer to spring, summer.
Awesome, thank you. Ran asked if that's like full story, how does this handle GDPR / etc. requests? And I believe this is session replay?
Yes, this is about replays, but I'm not, I know how we handle PII on replays. I'm not really familiar with the GDPR requests on replay. Neil, I don't know if you are.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and follow up. I think at the core of it, we want to make sure that PII is not persisted within Sentry, and we allow the scrubbing mechanisms at the client side, as well as with session replay. I think it masks like all the input fields and a bunch of the text out of the box. So that's how it plays technically. But on the legal side, it's a bit different. We do have the ability to kind of we are GDPR compliant, and some folks send us sign contracts with us that ensure that we can handle this data accordingly.
Awesome. And that pretty much answered Brett's question, right? Is there a way to flag certain UI elements in screenshots to hide customer PII?
So screenshots operates a little bit differently from replays, in the sense that we are extremely hard on PII. We do not capture anything unless you deem it's okay to do so. So that's actually just the switch. You can opt in or opt out. But we go hard on PII. Our automatic kind of setting is to not capture anything but the visual elements, like the UI elements.
Okay, thank you, Zoe. And we have just a minute left until the end, so let's see how much we can answer. How does this framework involves development, QA, and release team, including management roles?
Is the question specifically referring to how to use the framework, like how to use the SDKs with respect to all these roles?
It does seem like it, yeah.
Okay, so Sentry is targeted towards developers or developer adjacent roles. We are our features are targeted to helping developers spend less time, debugging or identifying or troubleshooting problems, so that they can spend more time building features. Now, when it comes to other roles like, team leads or, QA teams, or just, management, this is where our other functionality like, discover dashboards, discover, these are where those features come into play, where you can get a great overview of how your code is operating on a regular cadence, whether that be daily, weekly, or monthly. So Sentry's built for the developer, but we have additional tools that can help the team succeed.
Awesome, thank you, Zoe. And we are at time. We have 10 more questions, and we are going to try to answer them later. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. This is the end of this awesome workshop. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope we answered most of your questions except the last 10. But yeah, I'd like to thank you all for joining and for asking all these questions. And also like to thank our friends Zoe and Neil for taking the time to do this with us today, for answering all the questions, and for the awesome demos and the presentation. As I mentioned, if you have a minute or two, please stick around and do the survey. At the end, we would love to know what you think of this workshop. Again, thank you everyone, and goodbye.